All right. So this live video email intro is great because, as it turns out, long before the Battle of Valor was ever composed, William wrote me a poem of his own, henceforth to be known as the Barcarolle of Alex. Thus, with his permission, the poem in this letter shall serve as the life update email intro. The Barcarolle of Alex. Now it is time for Poems with William, the part of the letter where William writes a poem. Wherever he goes, you're sure to know he has tales of old and things to show. An enjoyer of art, and a man such, it's not an addiction, more of a cultural touch. I do have to give it to him, Violet Evergarden was great, and anyone who disagrees we can both berate. He speaks quite fast, almost double the speed of your average surfer high on weed. What he says, it's quite intriguing. From philosophy to science, he's done his reading. If you want to live life without thinking a lot, I suggest you stay back and speak like a Scot. As for me, I'll jump in and see how long he can talk without needing to pee. You have to understand, he's got quite the brain, something you'll notice hasn't gone down the drain. But most of all, he's awfully nice to have around as you navigate life. Because he's very generous, thoughtful and kind, humorous, upbeat, and never resigned. When I think of him, I remember a quote by one of John Wesley, a man of note. My first priority is to be a scholar. My first priority is to be holy. My second to be a scholar. That Mr. Treat inspires me to live this way, I would happily bet $1. Isn't that just fantastic? Me and William share a brain, I swear. It's great. Anyway, after finishing last night's email, I watched some more of Frian and then slept. The next morning I had church, and neither Noah or Joe were there for lunch, and their absence was felt. Still, conversations were good that were had, and eventually I got talking about spiral dynamics, which was fun. My audience did dwindle as time wore on, but nevertheless, I think people learned some cool things, and I enjoyed recounting the information. Once I got home, Grace and I all hopped in the car, and we drove down to Little Bird, originally to see if they had any quiche left, which they did not. So we drove down to Howling Cow, which had never actually been to before, and we got drinks there. Now see, the drink ordering experience was a interesting one. Because, understand, they had a Valentine's menu in place, and so it just so happened the drink I wanted was called, and I quote, a kiss on the lips. Hence, what might have been a daunting task for many presented itself, but I refused to even hesitate. I walked up to the barista, prepared my best smolder, Tangled style, and said, hey. The scene erupts with sparkles and blossoming roses as they fill the edge of your view. Can I have a kiss on the lips? It was absolutely fantastic. To be fair, I didn't it didn't go exactly as that went. It didn't go exactly like that. I ordered my drink, but I did gauge her in some banter before I said those words. So yeah, and I also didn't smolder, though I think I might have given an eyebrow raise. But regardless, I asked for a kiss on the lips with confidence, and she gave it to me in the form of a chai latte. However, the one thing I must say that did catch my attention is our entire banter conversation, and even when I was ordering, she matched my direct eye contact. No one ever does that. It turns out X and XJ types particularly do this thing, I've totally noticed myself doing it, that they call the death stare, where we just make such intense and constant eye contact that people find intimidating. But usually the other person breaks and looks away, but this barista just stared right back at me. After a solid minute of conversation, and thereby a solid minute of continuous eye contact, I finally kind of felt the awkwardness that most people probably feel in the first 10 seconds, and so I broke and looked away. I basically never break first, so it was memorable to me. She must have been an INFJ. Anyway, having obtained my kiss, I then sat down with Grace and Mom and heard Grace tell the tales and the escapades of her New Zealand adventures. It was good, definitely a wandering, non-linear exposition, but a good one nonetheless. Shortly after that, the Myers came over for dinner, which I thought was a welcome Dad and Grace back dinner, but apparently it was advertised as a birthday dinner for me. And we had fantastic food, very good. From there, we went over to Dunn Elementary and played originally Groundies and then Ultimate Tag, and it was alright. Not a bad way to spend the time, but not my favorite by any means. I pushed myself the first time physically in ages playing Ultimate Tag, and, I hardly did any physical exercise at all before that. But I felt so sore the next day. But that's to skip ahead. After it got dark, we all came back and sat and listened to the parents' conversation for a while. That was mostly pretty boring. I then thought Johanna wanted me, her, and Grace to leave, as we discussed earlier. So at that exact moment, which definitely struck me as odd that she wanted to leave in the middle of the conversation, because, of all the people, the FE dominant wouldn't want to be socially uncouth. But nevertheless, I was like, okay, only to later figure out that was not what she was trying to say. So yeah, that was a bit of a rip, but such is life. Me, her, and Grace then grabbed Boba, and I was going to take them on a canyon drive, but they were like, we don't want to do that. So instead, we just came back to my house and had our entire discussion in the apartment. That was a very good discussion, if I do say so myself. It ended with Grace giving Taylor a call and trying to get him to take the personality test, but oh my gosh, that man's attention span is non-existent. I completed the test in 5 minutes, and I swear it took him 30. Absolutely painful. But regardless, he did finish it, and he got an ESTP, though upon reflection, I'm mildly confident he's an ESFP, just given how he answered some of my questions and my knowledge of him. But yeah, we did get somewhere in the end. It just took ages. The next morning, I woke up and worked for 2 hours on my thisness and suchness paper. I then got Wendy's for $2 because they had some sweet deals going on, and I watched some anime as I ate the Wendy's before proceeding to take a nap, where I worked on my paper. After which, I worked on my paper for another 4 hours. I stopped once it was time for dinner and did fanime, which Johanna arrived a bit early for Monday night stuff, so she sat in on the tail end of our anime. After some small talk, everyone, meaning Benj and Noah, arrived, and we all piled in the car and drove to IKEA spontaneously. The trip was good. Some good singing was done, but then once I got to the IKEA, we just wandered around some. Me and Benj found some elevated lounging places, and then we all bought chocolate and ate cinnamon rolls. From there, we had a complicated journey to Wendy's, but we did in fact make it, and then upon attaining our food, we consumed it on the drive back. Honestly, the drive back was great. I don't know what it made so great, but the vibe was peak, at least from my perspective. So I really enjoyed that part. Once we got back, people departed. I listened to Jake's narration of the last life email, which was great, and then I went to sleep. Tuesday was my birthday, but the day proceeded quite averagely. I woke up, did funime, had classes, and then talked with Ben about orthodoxy of all things. He initiated that conversation, pleasantly enough. I then went over to Neo and Cindy's house, where I heard John's tales of his mission trip to Belize. Then once I got back, Luke and Simona, my cousin and Luke's wife, came over, and we had dinner and some desserts. And we just chatted for a while. The conversation was decent, not terribly interesting, but not terribly boring. I did discover Simona was an ENTJ, which was very interesting to observe her social style as a female with high TE. I mean, first off, I could totally recognize the TE. Like, it was very distinctive. And second, it made me reflect on how I must appear socially, like, as a literal dominant TE. I'll tell you one thing, it certainly isn't warm and fluffy. So yeah, observing her was probably the most interesting part of the occasion for me. After that, I cracked some letters as birthday gifts to myself, and Neo made these two ENTJ memes for me, which I actually love. Very well done, Sydney. I will now proceed to share them with you. Aren't those great? Look, if any of you want to make me memes, particularly ENTJ memes, I will at least transiently give you my affection. I just figured I'd, open the floor, just in case you wanted to. The next morning, I worked on a philosophy paper about thisness and suchnesses, which I will say may turn out to be very revolutionary, but we shall see. I then journeyed to the Whiskey Still with Dad when we talked, and he got me a very delicious burger. Man, those burgers are so good. That place is pretty posh, but surprisingly not so expensive. So, yeah, here's a picture of that. Once I got back, I was kind of lost what to do, but Esther crossed my mind, so I sent her a text letting her know I was thinking of her, and to my surprise, she was willing and free to call. So spontaneously, we called and talked for the next hour or so, which was probably the first call we'd had in like a year. And honestly, it was really good. Very good call. I think we're now back to where things were, and I'm, pretty reconciled, so that made me quite happy. However, I did have to cut that conversation short, as I was scheduled to meet up with David at a kaba bar for some chess. Hence, I did that. And first off, I must say, downtown Fort Collins kaba bar has a vibe. Here's some pictures. But included in that vibe is loud and, tasteful music. So not all good things. Unfortunately, the main reason I decided to go there, the sit in the floor chess set of which Ben spoke, was removed, which was mega sad. But still, David and I found a spot where we got 2 games in. I beat him in the first game, but mostly because he made big dumb mistakes, and then he beat me in the second game. As for the kava itself, it was extremely underwhelming. Per Ben's recommendation, I got the fancy double the price kava, but all that ended up meaning was I got half the kava for double the price. Yeah, I tried David's and honestly didn't taste bad, just grapefruity, and so I regret buying the fancy stuff. Also, I felt nothing. Like, my tongue didn't even go numb, so I effectively paid $11 for mad grape juice. Yay. But hey, you win some, you lose some. Still, it was a good game of chess, and I'm glad I checked the place out at the very least. Once I got home, Mom made magic food, so I consumed that. Not just she made food, it wasn't magic food. I then worked on this Life of Email Summit before having a brief call with Karina and then going to sleep. The next day I woke up, went to classes, finished classes, and then drove to a coffee shop whose name I can't remember to meet up with Luke, Simona, Morgan, Grace, and Ben. But as soon as I got there, they were like, yeah, we're hungry. So I drove right back home, and they all picked up food. And I couldn't eat food because I was a little fasting. After that, I chilled in the very fluffy chair in the corner of the house and sorted through all the music, buffing up my instrumental playlist with some new content. However, as aforementioned, I was hungry. Thus, focusing was very hard. Hence, after like 2 hours of doing that, I succumbed to throwing the squishy ball around with Luke and Grace and Mom and just engaging in small talk for the next 2 hours or so. It was honestly mildly enjoyable. I mean, you all know this about me, but I'm largely discontent with such meaningless activities. But interestingly, it has come to my attention that didn't always used to be the case. I'm recording my old life emails to make an audio backlog, which I'll talk more about later, I presume. But something I noticed is back then, granted, like meaning over 4 years ago, I was much more content spending my time in trivial ways. Like I would consider just playing video games with cousins or freeze tag, for instance, a day well spent. And, I'd finish the day satisfied, even though that's all we did. I mean, to be fair, that might still be how I felt at the end of a day, given my mode. If I'm on vacation mode, then my success condition becomes, comfortable existence rather than objective awesomeness. But I don't think that, I was in vacation mode at that point in time. Though also, to be fair, doing things with people often does leave me more satisfied than not. But regardless, the point is, I did a pseudo-pointless thing, and I didn't mind it that much. And that harkens my memories back to my youngest self. That's what I was wanting to say. And could I have just said that? Probably, yeah. But when do I ever say things in life that it's in the most efficient way possible? Let's be realistic about our expectations, shall we? After throwing the ball around, I then drove to Joe's, where Joe, per stay-at-home dog-sitting duties, was located. My philosophy class had been relocated there, so he could be included. Honestly, it was a pretty nice thing to do it there. Though I desired to use the Malonian whiteboard, which, was lachrymose, as non-existent objects are not very useful. However, one downside was that Joe was distractible. Hence, once we got through one quiz, the rest turned into a recap/generation session to see if they could figure out what was wrong with Anselm/Gödel's ontological arguments. And honestly, they did exceptionally well, I must say. And yeah, that was how I spent the rest of the night before driving home and sleeping. The next day was chemo, in which Nemo became my first non-parental recurring chemo buddy. He did well. I got to test him on how to say unicorns don't exist, and also shared with him my cutting-edge work on thisness and suchness, which he found quite intriguing. I honestly think I'm on the edge of something really big here. I'm going to have to, have a breakthrough. But of course, we'll have to see if I actually get there. Still, it was all very exciting. Once we got back, he dropped me off, and I just sat in the sun with Mama Grace for a bit. Honestly, the sun felt mega good on my chemo body. However, I will say this round is was pretty light, all things considered. I don't really know what I've done differently, but I felt not nearly as bad. I felt bad, but not bad. So that was nice. Still, I didn't really have the life force to do anything with my day, hence the rest of the day was spent watching anime both by myself and with the family until I went to bed early. The next morning, I was still fasting, hence I was hungry, but I felt good enough to I felt a good amount better. I watched some anime pass the time until I got to eat, which I ate a bit before feeling pretty nauseous. Johanna came over because apparently her house was barren and her and Grace did stuff. I laid outside in the sun and listened to lo-fi while they did their thing. And they got me a chai shake, which was nice. Then she left, I took a nap, had funame, ate popsicles. See, one thing that's really unfortunate about the first match of chemo is that most things taste really bad except sugar, which tastes significantly better, but still not great. Hence, if you're hungry, you just want to eat sugar. So, like a good and virtuous man, I gave in to my temptations and consumed sugar in, voracious quantities. And then that night, I read some letters and went to sleep. Sunday I was feeling functionally better, but still mad. But, since I was functional, I went to church. I then ate some food that tasted gross due to my nature and not the foods. And then we, meaning Noah, Seth, Joe, me, and Jack, all played a game of reverse magic, which was either meh or eh. But it was better than lively social interaction because my stamina was sapped. After that game wrapped up, I went home, took a chemo nap, and then proceeded to go over to Neo and Sydney's where Bible study was, and I ate their food and sequestered myself away in their office as Bible study happened so I could work on my philosophy paper, and also make good progress. I then emerged when we decided to all go shopping for food for the movie night, but once I got back from the shopping, chemo come with me, and I was like, I gotta bail because I feel super tired. However, before I left, Neo and I did finish Children of the Whales. We had 10 minutes left from 4 months ago. So, task completed. Once I got home, I literally watched half an episode of Freehan and slept. Monday, I had most of the way made it to full recovery. With I could also taste a bit of stuff. With still a bit of taste stuff and tiredness residually there. But anyway, I worked on my philosophy paper for a few hours that morning. I ate breakfast and prepared by my father as I watched anime. I then went down to the dungeon for the aforementioned backlog live demo recording. Did that for an hour or so. Got lunch at Wendy's for $2 because they have the big deals before getting back to work on my paper. I've been working on that for the next 3 hours or so until I had to leave for Monday night. Monday night was actually pretty good, I must say. Honestly, a pretty perfect balance of activities. To begin with, completely unrelated to my previous statement, Joe has a bit more of a chipper demeanor as of late. So when I got there, he spontaneously offered to give me a haircut, which he actually did a really nice job. So I now look spiffy. Regardless, because Ray and David are away, there is no food. Thus, we all had to make our own. And it was actually pretty fun. It broke up the monotony, and added a spice to Monday nights that I enjoyed. Also, my butter spelling skills are unanimously regarded as phenomenal. Just ask anyone. Oh, man, I must say, cinnamon butter on bread is big good, also big cheap. So, in the future, probably going to make that happen again. So, yeah, we ate food, had a mini D&D session in which the party fought one of my aphic demons. Honestly, probably my favorite monster I've made so far. I'll give you a picture just so you can see what they're cool. This is why we use AI art generation in our campaign, boys. Anyway, if I think of it, I should have had them fight 2, as that would have been a good challenge, but still, 1 was hard enough for them. After we watched a few episodes of Blue Lock, we then called it a night. Next day I had classes, which I did. Worked on this life update because I figured, if I spread working on life update instead of doing it all in one go, it makes life easier. I then called with Shimrick, and they were like, hey, would love to do an interview, but the day you have doing the interview is on the day I have chemo, so I can't. However, they said they might try and fly me out on a different day, so who knows? Maybe I'll get to do the interview regardless. Pretty crazy that the company is willing to, fly people out that they want to interview all the way to California with all expenses paid. At the very least, it's a pretty novel experience, so I want to do it if I can, even if I don't get the job. But I'm kind of hoping I get the job. After that call, I worked on my thisness and suchness paper, read some more philosophy. You know how I finished those 2 metaphysics anthologies? Well, I've basically started a metametaphysics anthology. It's not technically an anthology, but it's structured like an anthology, and it's about 600 words, so I think it counts. So yeah, when I'm done with this one, I think I'm for real done with metaphysics. Probably. Anyway, read some of that, did some funame, got to talk to Emerson about Jungian psychology stuff, which was interesting. At first, I thought Emerson, who's Grace's friend, by the way, was super shallow, but, I think that much less now. She's probably an INFP, which makes sense with Grace, because, any buddies. But yeah, I think I was able to say some things that she finds helpful moving forward. Then finally, that night ran out some Discord with Sydney, and that did not go so excellently, but that's all I have to say about that. The next morning, I woke up and headed over to the Bowen's house because Alan had invited Neo and I to attend a chemistry lecture where the guy was giving a philosophy of science background on why chemistry worked. And he did pretty well, honestly. Like, I didn't learn anything, but that's not because the guy said anything wrong, so that was good. Albeit, it was a little bit boring. After that, I briefly talked with Neo, since our conversation with Sydney was brought to his attention. And then once I got home, I worked on recording some backlogged life of day emails, did a Walgreens run to have them prepare my steroids, and then did more backlogged life of day emails. Yeah. After that, Michael and I called, and as we talked, I walked around City Park, and it was good. He's studying formal logic right now, and he got to explain to me modal logic in more depth, which I found super helpful. And we just chatted about philosophy and caught up. Once I got back, I cracked online Sydney's letter, and it was very good. Then, before bed, I engaged in a touch of philosophy before letting my body collapse into a paralyzed state. Class was over the next day. Class was over. That's what I said. Yeah. Oh, I guess that makes sense. I went home early because I figured there was no way my journalism class would have an activity for the third day in a row because the class activities are chosen by random. But no, I was wrong. There was indeed a class activity unless I missed it and lost points. I then got Wendy's for a big price. We're talking about a meal for $2.18. Kind of cheap. And then I did more work on my philosophy paper before going out to provide emotional support for Dad. Now, let me just say, providing raw emotional support is one of the most challenging and unnatural things for me. I mean, I guess that checks. I am, being functionally useless and fuzzy, and that's like the definition of FE. Hence, my badness at it because it's my 8th stat. But regardless, Dad was fixing Grace's car, and he basically requested I come there to help him, but we both knew that just meant I'd give him emotional support because there's not room for 2 pairs of hands in the car. So, though I was begrudging, I did go, and I proceeded to stand beside and encourage him for about 45 minutes while he very frustratingly attempted to attach a transmission fluid hose. And I did basically nothing, but I was there the whole time. And I mean, on occasion, I held a flashlight, and I just, generally was there, so that was hard for me. Anyway, basically, it's for the reason that was hard for me that I ended up staying because I realized I just kind of suck at being there for people. I want to do something, or at least have some objective value I bring that's greater than, you make me feel better because you're wasting my time too. But nope, that's not how emotions work. So yeah, I did eventually leave before he finished because it was snowing and he got the hose on, so the next part was easy. But the important part is I stayed for much longer than a past me would have, so I think I improved. Maybe personal growth, maybe personal regression, who's to say? Also, while I don't commend Dad's stubbornness and inefficiency, I will say he's hardworking and did get the job done, so definitely an admirable trait, even if I think that it would have been more prudent to call it quits once it literally started snowing. But anyway, once I got home, I read some of the more of the Spiral Dynamics. I read some more of the Spiral Dynamics book, which I must say is needlessly esoteric. Like, it's not like writing the things in the way they do improves understanding. It just makes them sound smarter. Which, when you're extensively read in works that use actual big words for real usefulness, then you know the difference. And so it does not, in fact, make them sound smarter to the educated mind. After that, I met with Benj, Joe, Karina, Jake, Sam, Seth, Dylan, and this guy named Jordan for pizza, which Jake put together for Benj's birthday. And it was kind of a meh experience. I didn't really have all that much to talk about. It seems like neither did anyone else, but, pizza was good. Then, after some complications, we journeyed to the summit where we all did a round of bowling, and that was pretty fun. We got to go in this, VIP section, which, amazingly enough, given all the time I spent at the summit, I'd never been in before. It was pretty cool. Here's a picture. I totally had the game in the bag until literally out of nowhere, Jordan, an NPC from my perspective, just came out and got 3 strikes in a row. Like, what the heck? It was so vexing. Here's a picture of the final scores, with me at 123 and Jordan at 149. Literally because he has 3 strikes in the last game. See that 123 score? Yeah, that normally would have been, a score I could be proud of. But no, there has to be Jordan's 149 score right there, too. Whatever. He won fair and square, but it's still unjust. After that, we all played some pool, which was decent. I got to talk to Dylan some and got to get to know him a little better, which was good. From there, I rode with Jake and Charity, and Jake took a nostalgic way back and visited his old abode, and we had an interesting conversation as he revisited the position on what stage he's in, according to Spiral Dynamics. And yeah, once I got back, I did Funime and slept. Next morning was the funeral of my somehow related to me Peter. I never really knew him. He was on my mom's side of the family, and we interacted quite infrequently. However, he was Catholic, so the funeral was Catholic. And honestly, I was disgusted at the irreverence which the homily was given and the service conducted. Like, the priest did all the right motions and stuff, but there was 0 heart in it. And the homily was really bad, like objectively garbage. See, I respect Catholicism so much as an intellectual discipline that when I encounter it in practice, it's just appalling. It's like it was advertised as beautiful, hand-carved wooden statue, only to see what they actually shipped me was an injection-molded knockoff. It's actually gross, and honestly made me a little bit mad to see such a beautiful tradition defamed in such a manner. But aside from the trash liturgy, the one good thing that came out of it was I got to see Dave and Sam again, who I haven't seen in ages, so that was good. We planned to hang out, which I was excited for, but they were all very insistent I drink alcohol at this hangout, which I am less excited for, so we'll see how I handle that. I left the funeral early because I had to go buy food for the upcoming cabin trip organized by John, with the express intent of shooting many guns. So I went, and I did that. I also got way too many eggs. After a short while, we then began our drive for that, and here's a picture. However, due to the aforementioned conversation, the start of the journey was pretty tense emotionally. Though to try and lighten the mood and eventually lessen the tension, I did, act gregariously. When we got through to Denver, we had these empanadas, which were big good, but also big small. Hence, we also stopped by Wendy's to get some extra food. After that, we arrived at Alan's family mansion. Apparently, the Atkinsons are stacked, or at least they used to be. Okay, let me tell you about this place. So this mansion was built back in like the 1980s, and it's like posh for sure, but old person grandma kind of posh. It has like state-of-the-art technologies, like adjustable lights, a built-in radio into the wall, and a massive cathode ray to TV. Stuff like that. So yeah, really cool, but the functional level of your average house today are below. However, what's really cool is how it's built. It has 5 half stories, so it's like layers upon layers of a house. And it's basically a crescent with tons of decks. And on top of that, the rocks are actually built into the house. Like, how cool is that? Check out the pictures we got, or I got. There's a rock in the room. Basically, hasn't been lived in the past like 5 years, so it's kind of just old and falling apart, but still such a cool house. And while everyone just kind of unwound, I spent a bit of time stargazing on one of the many decks, and it was chilly, but a good experience. I then had a massive brain idea to see how my speaker sounded in the pool room, and the answer is it sounded amazing. My speaker is pretty loud in general, but in that room, the bass just reverberated through you. It was spectacular. Hence, of course, I couldn't resist the urge to play some of the songs I've been loving as of late, and it was marvelous. Pretty soon, Neo, Sydney, and Alan found me, and we all decided to do a worship session for the next hour and a half with the awesome acoustics. Here's the doxology we sang at the end if you're interested. Then, once everyone else headed to bed, I stuck around and played some more of my favorite songs and killed my voice from singing too loud. But it was actually fantastic. Crazy how much joy an echoey room gave me. The next morning, Alan and I tag teamed Breakfast Creation to some good music. I then played a few songs from my epic playlist in the room, and then we drove to Alan's family's cabin, which was much less posh and much more jank. It was actually really nice weather, though, so once we got there, Neo and I decided we'd use the nice weather to shovel the snow. I shoveled the path to the outhouse, and he shoveled out the fire pit, and with our teamwork, we shoveled the area around the fire pit. Here is a picture of our work. Also, here's a picture of the cabin we slept in. Once we finished that, I took some time, just, sip on peach-flavored sparkling water and sit and think. It was a nice 30 minutes or so. After that, John and his friends, Nathan and Alex, Nathan's wife, arrived, so we all sat outside, ate sandwiches, and socialized. After we finished eating, around what is my guess? Around 1, that's my guess. We then went out to start shooting. Nathan drove his car up, and even though it was a four-wheel drive, it did not do well in the snow. So it got kind of stuck, and thus we decided we'd leave it there for the time being and fix the issue later. Then began the great shooting, and oh my gosh, so many guns. Basically all Nathan's. All right, you ready for this? Pictures, courtesy of Sydney. I shot a .22 pistol, a WMR pistol, a Hellcat, a 12-gauge shotgun, a Walter, a Canic, a stubby gun that I don't know the name of, a John. No, the gun is actually called the Judge, and John is not actually near my line of fire, just really looks that way. I shot a Glock, an AR-10, which was by far my favorite, a Gerson Regard, a AR-9, which is like a spray and pray gun, and lastly, a PSA dagger. And with that, we have now covered all the guns which I shot, which was honestly a ton of fun, and the time just really flew by. Here's another 2 pictures Sydney got of us at the range. So yeah, we shot guns until it got dark, and then we headed back to the cabin for food and fire. And it was very close, but we did manage to get Nathan's car back down the road, so that was definitely a godsend. Once we got back, Nathan made burgers, and we chilled around the big bonfire, which Neo and John made. Here's a picture. And it was a very momentous thing that happened. I drank alcohol. See, here's my line of thought. On occasions, becoming less infrequent as time progresses as my friend gets older, and my complete abstinence policy regarding alcohol has inconvenienced me socially, it portrays like this I'm not fun vibe, which, while I think is a stupid judgment to make because someone doesn't want to drink, is very much a real and common judgment. So, the big downside, to not drinking is that. The bigger and more pressing problem, however, is that the aforementioned scheduled hangout with the second cousins, Ben, all three of which insist I drink, is coming up on me. And hence, I needed to prepare myself. Thus, my thought process was as follows. It seems advantageous to potentially switch over to moderation principle rather than total abstinence position, in general because of the negative social connotations, but also because of the particular event coming up. It also seems wise to find out how much alcohol I can take and how it affects me, and if it affects me strongly, in a safe place, aka a place where Neo can monitor me in case I don't recognize him being tipsy, before I'm in a state where I might be edged on to drink by people with little regard for my moral scruples. Thus, I didn't just drink that night. I drank until I felt something, which it turns out is after 3 shots of Fireball whiskey, a shot of some definitely super expensive whiskey, and a shot of 90% proof moonshine. However, that said, that was over like the span of 2 hours, and I ate some food during that time, so I'm not sure if that makes a big difference. No, so I'm sure that makes a big difference. But what I learned is it seems a good amount of alcohol is required to affect me or make me feel something. So I was less affected than I anticipated, at least until the point where I could feel a difference. Until that point, I didn't have almost any significant changes in behavior, if anything, and I felt more uptight, if anything. I was like really concerned I would say something that I regret because my inhibitions were lowered. So at least like the level of tipsy I got to, the alcohol just made life worse because it made me feel like, the stuff in my mind was trying to get slurped out by the universe. Hence, I had to like control myself a lot more, and that was a chore. The only difference that I can speak of psychologically is my mind did feel a bit more fuzzy. As for the other phenomena I experienced, balance was a little bit harder, but not in any sense challenging. But I could feel a difference. And other than that, I just felt super normal. My vision didn't lag at all. Maybe that meant, I stopped too early. But I was able to function, speak, and think normally by all measurable regards. So there you go. That was my first genuine alcohol drinking experience, and I now feel much better about doing a shot with someone for the sake of social cohesion, because I know it's not going to affect me almost at all. Nevertheless, my position on alcohol stands. It doesn't seem really worth it to, almost any regard. And I'm willing to drink it if it has social utility, and as long as I don't have to pay, because alcohol is expensive. So yeah, we called it a night around 10:30, and we all attempted to go to sleep. Oh, I will say the alcohol did make it easier to sleep. I noticed that too. So I fell asleep, and then I woke up like 3 or something at some ungodly hour because I couldn't go back to sleep. So that was lovely. Basically, I just ended up lying in bed unable to sleep for the rest of the night, and I used the time to dream about my future, and honestly, it was great. I mean, the knocking to sleep part wasn't great, but the dreaming about the future part really got me excited, so that was great. So yeah, I was pretty sleep deprived the next morning, but such is life. And then Sydney and I tag team breakfast creation, of which here's a picture of me making everyone bagel sandwiches. After breakfast, we all engaged in cleaning of various sorts. Some of us cleaned up the cabin while others picked up the shells from the shooting, which was a lot, mind you. And yeah, it took a bit, but we finally finished everything up around 12 and drove home. Since I was sleep deprived, I didn't talk much on the way back. I just listened to Owl City, and that was nice. Once we got back, we said our goodbyes and parted ways. I then took a shower as soon as I got home, which felt amazing, and then I depacked and proceeded to watch a lot of anime because I was too tired to do anything that was thought productive. But also, I couldn't just go to bed because I needed to wait until it was nighttime, so I had to kill some time in between. I then looked into some AI stuff that would be, and what it would take for me to become attractive, because, I think it's feasible if I'm smart about it, and hence I have now acquired a new goal: become hot. Upon acquiring that goal, I then went to sleep. Yesterday, I got a fantastic sleep, did Funame, worked on my This Is Such As paper, started thinking about the speech I was going to give at the Myers birthday party later that day. I then went over to the Schroeder's house where me and Grace tried to learn how to shuffle dance. She got it down, I did not. But I suspect, that's because the dance was very similar to a dance she already knew. Then once I got home, I recorded more of the Life Deal backlog, of which I have a tangent. Okay, so I've been reading through and recording all my life demos, right? And it's been striking how much I've both changed and remained constant. Yeah, I can totally see the continuity of character between time. I was emotionally dumb, super confident, just did what I wanted to, very hardworking, ambitious, etc. But what really hits me is the lack of nuance. I'm feeling looking at myself as a 64-bit character as opposed to a picture. I'm sure, it's definitely still me, but man, the time when I straight out asked the guy, hey, why are you always grumpy? Genuinely thinking it had no offensive connotation, and then getting really confused when he got mad at me, or the fact when I picked up Sarah in my car and then drove her to Hurstooth and did, a one-on-one hike and then tried to evangelize her, and then 2 days later did the exact same thing with the other girl from my work. What's her face? Not even considering that it might have had romantic connotations, or I might look like I'm trying to just play these girls. And then a week later did the same one-on-one hike with a dude that's explicitly gay. It didn't even cross my mind for a second how they might appear, or the series of events might be odd in any way. Also, why on earth did both of those girls say yes and go with me? But anyway, it's not just my social intelligence, it's also my general haziness of thought. I was just straight dumber then. Sure, I was playing the meta, but I hadn't yet discovered the meta-meta, and seeing and remembering how I thought and lived my life back those 4 years ago really brings that, difference into perspective. Back then, sure, I was trying to live maximally and learn all the truth and stuff, but I didn't, change the framework I found myself in, or did I have nearly the perspective I do now? Remembering back, it was I was looking at reality through a keyhole. I just didn't understand, most anything. But the big import that hit me from rereading those life demos and recalling my past mindset is basically everyone's still there. You're all in the same headspace that framework is, where that framework is absolute. It's a very Spiral Dynamics 4 space, where the goods you desire, the methods for achieving them, you just can't see beyond them to some other way. A different framework is literally inconceivable, at least it was to me. And I don't know exactly who I'm writing this to, but the few of you, that have left that stage 4 mindset understand what I mean. And see, previously, I thought I left stage 4 as soon as I got back to the States, but that's super not true looking back. Sure, I started touching on stage 5, but reading back, I was very much in an absolute mindset with regards to frameworks. It wasn't a question of if, it was always a question of how. And I think that's a fundamental divide in my thought between then and now. There's a visceral quality, the difference of the thought that I can try and express, which I'm attempting to do, but the difference isn't propositional, it's perspectival. Because granted, my frameworks for the stage 4, success were not, performed gracefully. For me during that time, succeeding meant pulling an ENFJ socially with an INTP study bent, always working hard, being gregariously optimistic, athletic, and so on. But that was a challenge. How do I live in this, how do I live this ideal instantiation of the good? I didn't have the perspective to break free from viewing the world through the sum total of features of that framework. But see, it's not that the propositions of the assessment of the good are right or that I'm wrong, is that they're shallow, and that's the difference I feel acutely. My view of the world is so much broader, like so much deeper. I just assume when I talk to people, they're operating in that same like meta headspace, but I've got to get through my thick skull. They just aren't, and I wasn't. And yes, if my present self were to speak my 4 years ago self, I would have understood the present self as what he was saying in terms of raw linguistic meaning, but I wouldn't have like got it like I do now. Man, I sound so mystic right now. It hurts my soul. The point is, there's a point that most of you don't get. I'm writing it mostly for myself here. But the expansion of my view is both tangible and shocking to me, and I may need to treat people differently based on how I grasp that difference. Also, just remembering/reliving my past is just a trippy experience. I also think it was, I was a pretty great human being, kind of like the perfect amount of dumbness and smartness to be lovable. Like, I was innocently being awesome because that was the right thing to do. These days it's more of a calculated thing than all that, but don't want to dive too much into framework usurpation, lest all of you stage 4s read this and try and murder me. Anyway, thank you for indulging me. It's been quite the revelation personally, albeit an incommensurable one. Anyway, for those of you that would like to listen to the Backlog Live emails, either because, you weren't part of live emails until much later, or you're just curious, or maybe because, you want to see how my perspective changed over the years, or maybe because you want to go back to when you were first mentioned. I don't know, whatever the reason, I'll have the link to the Backlog audio versions in these emails from now on, so you should be able to revisit the ones you want to. I will say, after email 14 is where things start to get really good as far as backlog goes, so if you're, just going for the entertainment, I recommend you start around there. I'll try and release the backlog emails once per day until I catch up to the present, but we'll see how that goes. Here is the Spotify link. And for those of you who don't have Spotify, here's the YouTube link. Now, on to the other exciting event that occurred. After finishing recording live for the backlogs, I then mounted the Phoenix and journeyed to the Myers house, wherein I took part in a genuine Myers birthday celebration. See, ages back, like 3 months ago or something, Karina and I were talking, and she was able to obtain for me an invitation to have a Myers birthday celebrated as a faux Myers. And now the day had finally come when the celebration was no longer a dream, but a reality. So yeah, it was pretty great. I shared the occasion with Benj and Karina, and it was pretty cool to be part of the tradition. See, the Myers are this thing where everyone says something they appreciate about you, and it's a super cool tradition, and I big approve. But even that was toppled because they have a yet greater tradition. Each birthday is to give a speech after their compliments are received, and boy did I give a speech. I could tell you about it, but it seems best I just show you. Mandatory speech viewing link. Okay, tell me that wasn't fantastic. I'm very satisfied. Well, almost very satisfied. I made 2 significant mistakes in the heat of the moment. The first of which is I totally forgot to mention Seth Meyers in my speech, which I totally planned on doing. But the second, and potentially more egregious, is it made it sound like I told Karina I liked her romantically and she turned me down. See, I mentioned that fact. I mentioned the fact she was unwilling to swoon for me in my speech, but that was in reference to my request that she do a swoon for my Perry the Platypus remake, not some romantic confession. But yeah, Mom was like dying of secondhand embarrassment because she thought I was referencing some non-existent confession I made, and thus, I'm assuming many of my hearers, unaware of the context, probably came to the same conclusion. But no, sorry to disappoint you all, but Karina never romantically rejected me, though she rejected my request to swoon, so if you want to extrapolate to counterfactual scenarios, you can do so. Just wanted to clear that up. And yeah, it was great. I think I might really enjoy acting. I never really tried it, but I had fun giving that speech. Anyway, other than that, I played a bunch of games of chess while listening to Jake, and I did horribly. I lost to Joe, of all people, twice. And then we opened presents, of which I had no clues what would happen, because I assumed the Myers didn't do presents, because that would be, exorbitant. Think of the amount of cost that would accrue with 11 kids. But it was a very pleasant surprise, and everyone got me basically food gift cards, and it was great. Then, finally, that night, Benj and I played some table tennis down in the basement, and we had a conversation that was probably the best we've had so far. I mean, first off, we got to talk over table tennis, which is always just a better way to talk. That's why, I like walking and talking. It's so much better than, doing something with your body as you talk. But second, the content of the conversation was very good and also quite enjoyable. So I'm glad I stayed and did that. We finished talking around 12:30, if I still recall, something around then. And yeah, that brings me to today. Today I've worked on the backlog emails and writing this email, and that's about it. I went over the Schroyers to cover for Grace for a bit and did some of that while over there. And yeah, I did some Funime, worked on this email, and now we're here. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and I will speak with you all again when the time arises.